moved on, I think.
Yeah, he was one of those conspiracy theorists.
Absolutely. Yeah, very much so. Again, you can find that on the internet, the bit where he's speaking out about his views on the JFK assassination. But at the beginning of January, the Notorious Bird Brothers album was released, and David Crosby's still on that. But that's the one with the cover that has, it's a Stables, I think, and you've got three of the band with their heads out the window, and David Crosby doesn't appear on the sleeve. The fourth window, there's a horse's head sticking out of the window.
So they pulled a McCartney in a way.
Absolutely, absolutely. So it's another one of those. The sort of jury's out as to whether it was a deliberate pop at Crosby, but I think it probably was. But again, he's on tour at the moment, David Crosby. I mean, he's all over the place. You can see him in America, the Netherlands, Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Belgium, and Italy. He's not coming to the UK yet, but those dates might be added. That's 19th of May through to the 13th of September. And Roger McGinn, the only guy that was in the original lineup of the Byrds and was the only member to go right through the whole history of the Byrds to their final gig. He's touring America he's got 2 gigs. It's not a tour, but he's got 2 gigs listed on the 30th of June and the 16th of March next year. So whether he's got some, I would guess that he will add some dates between those two he's got listed there. And Chris Hillman, of course, who was a major part of the early Byrds. He's touring America 19th of April to the 22nd of September.
Lot going on.
Oh, absolutely.
Now, if you could pick one of these tours to go see, which one would you go see?
Ooh, wow. I think the Electric Flag is one of the ones I would want to try and catch, because, I mean, seeing Barry Goldberg, Nick Gravenites with Harvey Mandel, I mean, that would be a really, really good gig.
Yeah, you've got me thinking about Roger Daltrey. I think if he comes through Detroit, I think I'm going to go see that show.
Yeah, I mean, to see Tommy again now, particularly with a full orchestra, I mean, that would be brilliant.
I was going to say, I was really too young to enjoy The Who during their prime. So, and my only real live experience I had with The Who in general was a video they put out. It was like MTV back in the 80s, where it was live in Toronto. And that's what actually broke me into liking The Who. It took me middle of 1980s to figure out who The Who were. I would like to actually have the full live experience.
Oh, that would be great, because he's such an integral part of that. Being the voice of Tommy. I mean, that would be a brilliant gig to go to. Yeah, now, he does a lot of stuff as well.
Is there a reason they don't tour as a band anymore? I know they don't. They'd have to bring in a different drummer, but in general, do they not get along?
Well, yeah. I mean, they famously have never really been bosom buddies, but there's only the two of them left now. They do tour separately, and they do tour together still. Because they will make a lot of money, because when he goes out with Townsend, of course, they'll go out as the Who, because Townsend toured Quadrophenia recently. I think it was last year. So there's lots of good opportunities to catch them,
and there's good opportunities to catch you. I guess you got a book signing coming up, right?
That's right. Yeah, it's in Leeds, in the north of England. I know the show is syndicated across the UK, America, and Australia. So for people listening in the northeast of England, I'll be doing a book signing in Leeds on the second Saturday of the month.
Of the month of June.
I'm starting doing that. It's the 9th of June. He says, quickly looking at his calendar.
I hit you up. I knew you weren't ready for it. That's all.
That's perfect. No, but what's happened is I've done a couple of them there now, and it's actually a record fair and book fair. So it's predominantly a record fair. So I take a few singles and albums as well, 50s, 60s, and 70s, and it's just a great day. There's some fabulous dealers there with some really good albums and stuff, and I get to talk to so many good people. People come up and we start chatting about rock and roll and music business in general, and it's just so much fun. I really enjoy it.
And what kind of records will you be bringing with you?
Well, what it is, it's mostly it's all from the 50s, 60s, and 70s, a little bit of 80s, but I got 45s there and albums. So there's there'll be a lot of Beatles stuff. Bob Dylan. I'm taking a lot of Bob Dylan for the first time this time because I've got quite a few good condition Dylan albums I want to take with me. And
so you're not only are you an author and a rock and roll historian, you are a collector of this music.
That's right, yeah, and a dealer in that sense, because I used to do a lot of record fairs before while I was working on the book, and then I hadn't done any for a couple of 3 years because I've been traveling around a lot. But now I'm getting back into doing regular record fairs because they're great places to do a book signing, because pretty much everybody who comes in is interested in, by definition, interested in music. And if you're interested in the music, modern day music, or the 80s or the 90s, it's all got its roots in the 50s and 60s, and that's all got its roots in the 20s, 30s, and 40s. So, looking at the roots of everything all the time tells you more and more about the music that you like, whatever that music is, really.
Is there a album of yours that's a cold dead hand album, one you'll never get rid of, not even out of your cold dead hand?
No, I've got a few like that. It's stuff I bought at the time, like Jimi Hendrix's first album, the Pink Floyd's first album, Stone's first album, Frank Zappa, one or two of his. Oh, Junior Walker and the All Stars as well. I bought the Roadrunner album because I really like that era of Motown, particularly Junior Walker.
You know why I had this line of questioning? Because I'm trying to set up next month because we're going to talk about our top 100 albums or something close to that, aren't we?
Absolutely. Oh, there'll be a few of them in there. It's interesting to see that it wasn't Sgt. Pepper that topped that list as well.
The one I sent you, isn't that interesting?
Yeah, it was number 4, I think, offhand. So it was certainly there, but it's a really good list. That particular compiler, it's got some really good classic albums in there.
Yeah, I think because of my age group, I would have swapped a couple of things out for other records. I was really wondering why some of the later ones they didn't include Whitesnake's Slide It In album, because I thought, for the 80s, that was an outstanding record. And, David Coverdale's one of the best singers of all time, in my opinion.
Oh, absolutely.
And he's kind of overlooked because, he did the Whitesnake thing. But before that, he was in Deep Purple.
That's right, yeah.
When Glenn Hughes was in the band.
Yeah. I've always been interested in where people came from in a lineup, where they went to, because that's how you get into different bands as well.
Exactly. I just segued again for you. I knew you would bring up your book right there when I did that. Speaking of your book, did I cut us off on anything before we get to your social media and stuff?
No. Yeah. Well, I'm very active on Twitter and Facebook. Twitter's at RNR Unraveled, and Facebook's at Rock and Roll Unraveled. And what I look to try and do is most days post something that happened on this particular day. But what I'm looking to do is build more and more background stuff around the book. So it's all factual stuff. And a lot of it is interesting gigs that have gone on. If I come across a poster that shows a bunch of people, sometimes in combinations that you weren't really expecting, I like to post stuff like that. So it's just great fun because often people then respond. I had Paul Jones respond to me on Facebook once. I'd written this thing about the very early Rolling Stones, how they came together, and we're talking about. I'd done this thing that included Thunder Odin, a band that Paul Jones. It was actually Paul Jones's band, and he Facebooked me, if that's the right term, to say that he'd invited Brian Jones to join the band, but Brian declined. But they did play together sometimes, and they recorded a tape, and they gave it to Alexis Corner to try and get him interested in them. So it's amazing the responses you sometimes get in Twitter and Facebook.
I mean, when you were a kid and growing up, did you ever think you this is where you would end up and the cool stuff that you would come across at this point?
In the sense of I've always been interested in music ever since I can remember. And I sort of grew up in the 50s and 60s, so that was great. So there was something new happening all of the time. I've always been interested in, most of the British stuff in certainly the 50s and early 60s were covers of American R&B, American blues. So I was always interested in trying to listen to the original versions of stuff, which was very difficult then because the radio in the UK played very little music. And
yeah, you had to listen to the offshore station to get anything good.
Exactly. I mean, pirate radio arrived in the early 60s, and that was when pop music became, available most of the day, and it was great stuff. And that was when you started to hear a lot of the more obscure stuff. That was great.
Awesome. Derek, when's your book signing one more time?
It's in Leeds on the 9th of June. And that's a Saturday.
So I expect everybody listening in on all our great affiliates in the United Kingdom to go see our buddy Derek Shelmerdine. That's an order from the John Lebang Show. Got to do something to support it's people that support us.
That will be great. And when people come along and they mention they heard it on the show, that'll be absolutely dynamite.
Anyways, Derek, I really appreciate you coming out this month and joining us and pretty much hosting the show. I'm like your co-host for this hour, and I'm happy to be.
Oh, it's just so much fun chatting about these various bands. And I mean, one of the things we were just talking about, how you get one guy's in this band and that band. Funnily enough, there's a guy called Skip Spence who was in 3 of the most influential West Coast bands at the time. I just about to mention Jefferson Airplane were at the festival. And I mean, they played all the festivals. They were at Magic Mountain, Monterey, Woodstock, and Altamont. I mean, they really were a major band at the time. And they had a first hit single with Somebody to Love around the time of the festival. It was interesting that in 1969, 2 of them, Jack Cassidy, the bass player, and Joe McCauken, the guitarist, they split off and formed Hot Tuna. And Jefferson Airplane themselves didn't split up till 72. So those 2 bands are running in parallel for 2 or 3 years, which is good stuff. And then they got back together, well, minus Kaukonen and Cassidy, because they decided they'd rather stay with Hot Tuna. But the others got back together as Jefferson Starship in the spring of 1974. And in fact, both of those bands are on tour now. Jefferson Starship, both tour in America. Starship, you can see, 2nd of March to the 29th of July. And Hot Tuna, 24th of March to the 1st of December.
Well, Derek, we're up against the time. We're going to have to get on out of here. I appreciate you coming on and being the host this hour. And we'll talk to you next month.
Oh, my pleasure, John. I've really enjoyed talking to you. All the very best.
T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We have liftoff. Tune in again next week. Same time, same space, same station.
Resistance is futile.